I'm using a new mic, so if it goes in and out, just kind of bear with us while we try to figure this stuff out. So, catching you up to last week, as we've been going through this series on being adventurously expectant and the series on trust, last week's challenge was to give up control, to take your hands off the wheel and to actually let God drive. I'm not sure how you all have been doing with that challenge this week. It's been a tough one for me. I know I'm struggling with it. There's a lot of things that, to reference something that Adina said last week, where she just has a tendency to put her hands back on her life. I know I've been struggling with that in a lot of areas, so it's been tough for me. But I want you all to find encouragement. If you've been doing that, there are going to be times where you want to reach back, but I encourage you just to keep giving up control. For me, it's one of those things where it's not so much daily I have to do it, but hourly. And if not hourly, by the minute. I just have a tendency to just try to wrench everything back. So hopefully you've been doing well with the challenge for the week, in addition to the Holy Boldness Challenge, that you've been able to give up control. And I was thinking about that, the whole handing the steering wheel over to God. Who here's been in the car with a bad driver? Like a really bad driver? All right. We've all we've all been there. Most of us have been there. We've just been in the car, and as the person's driving, they're doing things behind the wheel, and the whole time they're driving, you got your eyes closed, you're holding on to the handle, you're screaming in your head like, no, because you're waiting for impact. You're bracing for impact. You think the car is going to flip. You swear every car you pass, you're going to sideswipe, all of this different stuff, and that's got to be how God feels when we're driving. Like, no, don't do that. Turn, no! But if we just give him the wheel, he's going to take us where he wants us to go. And we have to be okay with that destination. It's getting on board with the route he chooses for us. It's getting on board with the direction he wants us to go. And we can't do that if we're fighting him literally at every turn. It requires both hands to be off the steering wheel. And let him control the gas and the brake also. So moving on to this week, as is what's become the normal for this series on trust, we're going to have two people speak tonight. Both of them have been involved with Isle of Faith for quite some time. Most of us know them. We know some of their story, or we've heard glimpses of their stories, but I'm really excited for tonight. It's just kind of this whole series is really kind of built to this. No pressure on you guys who are talking. But tonight, Chelsea McNulty and Robert McCracken are going to be speaking on trust. And yeah. So, without further ado, let's just bring Chelsea up here, wherever she is. Thank you.
That glare is brutal. Okay. This actually works great because I can't see any of your faces, so that'll make me way less nervous. Okay. This is weird. All right, so it's kind of funny that this whole thing is on control because I'm a control freak, and I had planned out today that I was going to, 10 minutes before service started, I was going to go in the prayer chapel and just try to get like my heart right and, be calm and have my prayer time and stuff so that I was ready to do this. And if you were in the fellowship hall, you know that didn't happen because I had a screaming toddler. So I'm going to pray real quick if you would like to pray with me because I didn't get to do that. So, yeah. Hey, God. Thank you for every blessing that you've given me, God. I thank you for every opportunity that you've opened up, God, for me to be able to use my story and all of the things that I've gone through, God, and how I found you, God. I pray that you help me breathe through this, God, so that I can hopefully communicate whatever it is that you want me to say tonight, God, and reach whoever it is that you want me to reach. Amen. Okay. All right. So I guess some of you kind of know some of my story or maybe a lot of it, but I'm going to give you a little bit of background in case you don't know anything. But my parents got divorced when I was like 4, and I saw my dad every now and then. I was bounced around. My mom worked really, really late and was at Prudential, and was really high up, and so she was constantly gone. She was very much wanting to provide everything we wanted and more, and that's kind of where her mind was there. And so we bounced around to different daycares and nannies and all kinds of craziness, and so I didn't have a lot of stability or consistency when I was younger, and I didn't have control of anything. So whenever I was in middle school, I was in 8th grade, so I was a year ahead, because I started up north, so yeah. And I got into smoking, just all the stuff that normally teenagers, and I'm just gonna keep talking. Okay. The teenagers in high school face, and I kind of started a little bit early, plus I was a little bit younger, so I started going downhill at 12, swapping out. I'm now on Brandon's mic. All right, so I started kind of going downhill at 12. It got really bad as I went through high school. I think my mom was so scared that, you know, I had kind of just fell off the face of the earth, basically, that she was in denial. It was really hard for her to accept that something was happening to her baby. At this point, she had quit her job so that she could spend more time with us, but it was kind of, at that point, for me, too late for me to want a relationship with my mom. So eventually, I was kicked out of 5 high schools, a couple of them here, and then I went down to South Florida eventually to try and do better there with my dad, and did do better until I found out that I'd have to go for another year and all this other mess, and so I was like, screw it, I'm done. I tried doing good, and it failed, and I'm done. I'm done trying to do good. So I came back and continued my downward spiral. My mom interventioned me when I was 18 and told me that I would not be able to have any contact with my family. They'd take away everything. I wasn't allowed to talk to my sister, my aunts and uncles, nobody, unless I signed myself into a rehab. I looked her square in the eyes and said some colorful words and walked out. Didn't speak to her for a couple days, and then eventually when I realized that I had no car and no money and no phone, and yeah, I realized how hard it was and said, okay, I'm just gonna go ahead and sign myself in. So I signed myself into a rehab, and I thank my mom every day for that, because through that 2.5 months, I learned how to handle a lot of the emotions that I had been suppressing for years, and learned how to kind of cope with life. So when I got out, I started kind of trying to come back into church. I tried to find a job and stuff, but I was still hanging out with the same friends. And even though I wasn't doing the same things, I one night was designated driving some friends and got in a wreck. And because I was on my prescription medications that my rehab had put me on to stabilize my mood and anxiety, was charged with a DUI and went to jail for 10 days and was on probation when I got out. And through that, I had gotten pretty kind of hopeless or whatever, and was just like continuing my screw it thing of how much more can I mess up my life kind of attitude. And I love you too. I just continued hanging out with the same people, and I got into more trouble, and I got into a relationship with a really bad person. He was 23 years older than me, and he took away every bit of control that I had. Man, I haven't thought about this in a long time. Oh, All right. He made me completely dependent on him. I would watch his kids. He made it to where I couldn't go see my friends. I didn't see my family unless he was there. I went to church, but only if he was with me. And he was just very manipulative and controlling. Convinced me to quit my job. So I was financially dependent on him. Almost convinced me to sign my car over to him, like sell my car and then get a new car in his name. So I'm glad I didn't do that. But I, with him, got pregnant and had been trying to leave for quite a while. And I had decided that I was going to move out because I couldn't handle it, but I wasn't strong enough, and so I tried making it work. He was gone one day, and he left his phone, and I saw his phone and saw text messages, and he had been seeing somebody else, apparently. And then had really derogatory messages to a friend about me being the young, hot blonde and just bad things. And so I decided that I was done, and I went home. I remember telling my mom, being absolutely terrified when I found out I was pregnant, that I went in and I'm like, so we need to talk. And she's like, are you pregnant? And I'm just, like every mom's like thinks that, I'm gonna say no, and I just kind of look at her. And she's like, oh my God. I'm like, absolutely terrified. I'm just like, I'm gonna get an abortion. Like, that was my instant reaction, is that, like, I can't take care of a child. I can't have a child. I never wanted a kid. I never wanted to get married. Never wanted any of that. I just wanted to be by myself and do what I wanted and destroy my own life, because that's all I have is just me. And so I talked to her, and she's like, you're not gonna do that. You have family, we love you, we're gonna work through this, it'll work out. I said, Mom, I don't wanna have any tie to this man. I don't want any tie to him. She said, it'll work out, Chelsea, it'll work out. We'll figure it out, we'll pray, it'll work out. And so, to me, I'm like, yeah, prayer's really gonna help me here, Well, I've been trying to control my life for years. And so, thanks, Sunday. So, anyways, I end up saying okay, and, we talk, and she's like, all right, whatever. And so I'm like home for like a month. I haven't talked to anybody, I'm just like, I'm scared to go out in the world. None of my friends want to hang out with me because I'm pregnant and I can't do any drugs or party, or, I'm pretty much useless at this point to them because that's all we did. So I had no friends. I had no job. I had my family, and so I sat at home for about a month and did nothing. And then one day I came up to the church, and my mom said, you should go talk to Julie, who in charge of the CDC. And so I'm like, okay, I'll go talk to her. So I go and talk to Julie and tell her, so I'm thinking that since, I'm having a kid and I've never really had any experience with a kid. I didn't babysit. I babysat Preston and Morgan a couple times, but other than that, they were like family to me, so it wasn't a big deal. But as far as like babies and stuff, I had no idea. And so I talked to her, and she's like, yeah, that's a great idea. You need experience. And so she instantly just gets me set up, and I have a job now. And I'm so terrified going into this job because I'm so clueless, and she puts me with 1-year-olds. I'm like scared to even touch them on my first day because I'm scared I might break them. But it was one of the best things that has ever happened or could have happened for me. After that, everything just kind of started working out, and I just started getting closer. It took me giving up and being completely hopeless with nothing, like I mean, me being responsible for somebody else's life and realizing that it's not my own anymore, it took that for me to actually like even attempt to give God control, to just let it go and be like, you know what, you have it, because I'm clueless here. Like, I'm completely out of my league. I have no idea what I'm doing. I have no idea what I'm going to do. So that happens, and I'm working, and I'm getting really good at working with 1-year-olds, and I love it. I love going to work. I love playing with them. I get excited to see them, no matter how stressed out I was that day, or like how tired I was or anything. I'd go in, and just seeing their smiling faces made my day so much better, and it made it bearable, even when I had to like fight them to go to sleep at nap time. Like, it was just awesome. And so after that, I had my baby shower, which was just incredibly overwhelming in a really good way, where I got everything I could have possibly needed for Riley, it's my daughter, and more. So much so that it's like everything that I had filled up an entire room, and I didn't know what to do with everything. But all of my needs were provided. And then I got to get involved with the youth ministry. And I got to build relationships with teenage girls that are facing the same stuff, the same temptations. And it's really hard to watch them go through that, because I want to just smack them and be like, stop, don't do that. Like, I know where it's going to go. But at the same time, I understand that you want to have friends, and I understand that you want to be liked, and you want to have, and you just want acceptance. That's all you want, is to just have somebody that cares and is there, and that's what they're doing. And it's really hard to watch that. So I try, I try to use the things that I've learned and knowing where my mind was at, to try and talk to them and help guide them. But they're my constant reminder of where I was and where I never want to be again. And I love being in youth ministry. But everything that I thought was so bad, everything that I was so scared of, it was all for the best. Like, it all worked out, and it's all helped me, and it's made me so happy, happier than I ever was, trying to please myself or control everything. And I loved what Adina said about and Rob repeated about like, you put your hand in and try to control stuff, because I still constantly struggle with that. I'm such a perfectionist that, like, I didn't write down my stuff for tonight, because I would literally sit here and have every single detail, and it would be like a robot. So, yeah, but I have to constantly remind myself to trust God that he has, and he can do it way better than I can. And I forget it all the time. And there was one poster that I saw a couple of years ago, and it was this guy kneeling, and everybody was walking around him, and it was blurs, and it said, "Be still and know that I am God." And I constantly remind myself that just about every day, to be still and know that I am God, and try to remind myself to trust him, and that he has it, and that he can do it so much better than I can. Because when I had control of my life, I messed it up. Like, badly, really, really badly. But now that I'm constantly surrounding myself with people from the church, and being involved here, and keeping my life focused on God and doing things for him, I'm happier, and my life is better than it would have ever been. So I owe that to God and to everybody else, to my family here, and everything that you guys have done for me, because you guys keep building me up, and to the youth and all of my girls that continue to remind me why I went through that stuff. That I'm here, and I'm here to help them, and that God had a plan for me all along, and that he still does, and I need to stop trying to figure out what it is. So, thank you.
It reminded me a lot of something that Greg said last week, when Chelsea was saying how she never wanted any of that. She didn't want to be married. She didn't want to have kids. She didn't want to be around kids. And of course, here you are with a kid and working with kids. But what Greg said, when he was married at 24 and then his wife left him, and it's not how he had planned his life. It's not how he had pictured his life. But here he was. He showed a picture of a couple weeks ago in Jamaica, which was the best day of his life. So often with our own lives, it ends up, if we follow God's plan, it's very simply, it's not how I would have done it. It looks nothing like what I planned. If your life makes sense, if it follows logical steps, you're way too in control of it. So when you look back on your life and you look at, and you're just like, how did I get here? This doesn't make sense. That's when God's involved, because you get moved and put in places that don't line up. They go against what you initially want or what you think is going to happen. So with Greg and Chelsea, really spoke to that really, really well. Speaking of weird circumstances, Robert?
All right. Hey, everybody. I made a few notes here, just a little outline. As Rob said, I've been attending Isle of Faith here for quite some time. Lola and I have been, my wife Lola, for those of you who don't know me, have been volunteer youth leaders here for 10 or 12 years. And recently we became the youth directors. So and Rob called me a couple of weeks ago and asked if I'd be willing to give a testimony and talking about trust and adventurously expectant. I'm like, my first response, I kind of let the stresses of the day kind of cloud my vision, and I'm like, I've got a testimony for trust, but this whole adventurally expectant thing, I'm not so sure about. It seems there recently it's been more like, God, you want me to do what? Or, okay, yeah, I see what you're saying. I know I need to fix that, and I'll get working on that. But as and a lot of you know a lot of my story, but there's since I've been here, but there's probably just as much of my story that I haven't shared. And part of it because I'm not real proud of it. I grew up here in Jacksonville. Great mom and dad. They still live in the same house that I've been pretty much raised in since I was a year old. Loving family, parents, they always there for us. I attended a small Methodist church over on the west side. It's called Good Shepherd. I was part of the youth program there. But I had two lives. I attended youth, and then I had this life outside of youth. I got, like Chelsea, I started drinking. I got involved with drugs at a very young age. And Satan kind of made some avenues where it always seemed that I had ability to find them. I wasn't very popular, and having access to these drugs and that made me popular, so people would come look for me. That continued on for a large part of my life, no matter where I went in the military and outside of that. Lola put up with a bunch of my foolishness for a long time. And till it got to the point that my actions were jeopardizing our marriage. And fortunately, God blessed me with a loving and godly and forgiving wife. I quit drinking, quit smoking about 16 years ago. Quit the drinking and the partying one day, and a month later I quit smoking. I started going back to church to help reconcile my marriage. I grew up in church, like I said, and I felt God move in the church. I received the love of the congregation, no matter what kind of trouble I was in. At church was always a loving place to go. Somehow, I really, through my childhood in the military and my exploits, I managed to stay out of trouble. I don't know. God was looking over me the whole time, because by all rights, I should have been in a great deal of trouble. But anyway, I started going back to church, and it was difficult. Immediately it was just hard for me to walk in. I sat there, and the anxiety just was almost unbearable, that I wanted to just run out. It was all I could do, just to sit in the pew. I felt like people were just staring at me, and I knew it was just a lie. It was just imaginary. I knew it was. I knew it wasn't real, but it sure felt real. So just to get through those few dozen times or whatever, just to get through the service. And that was actually Spring Glen, where I knew Rob and his family. That church and his father, Rick, were instrumental in helping bring me back to Christ. Lola and I, we were introduced into marriage encounter and some other activities like that. And just the timing, I could see God at work and just putting things in place that were helping us mend. I started teaching a Sunday school with Lola. But I was real careful about what I signed up for in most cases. I always watched to make sure that there was a beginning and an end. I didn't want to be trapped in something. And then we got into boating, sailing particularly, and that was kind of really brought our family together. We got to spend a lot of time on the water with each other and weekends and all of that. That was definitely a blessing to me. And we decided, after some convincing, we decided to sell everything we had, our home, most of our possessions, and we moved onto a boat with the family, 2 girls. We had a little dog, and we lived on it for 5.5 years. I look back at that time now as my time in the wilderness, finding my way back. And things just, every step, things just kind of fell into place. And I could just really see God at work throughout my life. The funny thing is, though, when I had all these friends before I quit the drinking, and as soon as I quit, I'm like, there was nobody around, okay? I knew they were all still out there, but I sure didn't see any of them anymore. And because all the relationships I'd really built before had been based on partying and drinking, I didn't know how to make friends. It was really difficult for me to not to talk to people, but to foster relationships. So that was really hard. Lola and I we moved out here when we moved on the boat, and we were out at Beach Marine. We still worked and did all those normal things, but we lived on a boat. But because of the drive, we just found ourselves doing less at the church, and we started looking for a Methodist church in this area. Isle of Faith never showed up on the radar, at first. And one day, we moved from Beach Marine to Palm Cove Marina when they remodeled it. And I got a voter ID card, a new voter ID card, because we changed precincts or whatever, and I put it in my wallet, never looked at it. And 2 weeks later, I got another one. And I'm like, I just got one of these things. I looked at it, and looked at the new ones, this church down the road, and I said, well, what did the other one say? And the other one said Isle of Faith, United Methodist Church. I'm like, Lola, have you ever heard of this church? And I'm like, no, we need to go check this one out. Well, we did, and we've been coming here ever since. So, when we started attending here, we immediately immersed ourselves in the Bible studies and the small groups. And again, I was really particular about what I signed up for. I wanted there to be a set goal, a task, a beginning, and an end. I didn't want to be trapped, but I tell you, working or attending those Bible studies and joining a group with a common goal or mission is a wonderful way to build relationships. It wasn't long before this church became my family. I was still holding on to something. I think it was pride. I'm not sure. But I had this question, and the whole thing about eternity. And it wasn't all that appealing to me to spend eternity just saying how great you are and I'm nothing, and just praising this masterful being from now on. It didn't appeal to me. I continued searching, attending Bible studies, and coming to worship, and God just kept working on my heart and my mind. And one day, right back in one of the seats over there, I found myself during worship just praising God, just bearing my heart and soul to God, and knew that I loved Him, and there was nowhere else that I would rather be except in His presence. I know that God has wonderful things intended for us, and it's not just standing there saying, you're it. He has a purpose for all of us here and in His kingdom, and it's going to be glorious. Shortly after, and kind of in the as all this is going on, I was baptized into youth ministry along with Chelsea and a lot of her other friends. And I tell you, serving in youth ministry, those kids have blessed me, I feel, way more and given me way more than I've ever given them. When I stopped indulging in myself and just gave my old life up, God gave me a new one. And He filled me with joy and filled this hole, and I was more content than I'd ever been in my life. He saved me. 2 years ago, I was diagnosed with throat cancer. I caught it pretty early. The prognosis was always good, but because of the size, I was told that it was advanced and it was growing quickly. You know, never once did I blame God. I don't believe that God gave me cancer. I blame myself. It's a fallen world. It's because of the choices I've made in my life. But God was preparing me for that moment. Just weeks before, I attended Youth Quake Live with our youth group, and the message was about this poem where this lady written this poem about the dash. You know, that little dash between your birthday and the day you die, and about wasting or how are you spending your dash, and made me question that. And I knew I wasn't wasting it with the time I was spending with youth. I asked them that night, though, if I was wasting my time or not, but I knew I wasn't. Just a couple weeks after that, Pastor Aaron gave a message about David and Goliath, about facing our giants. You know, it really spoke to me and strengthened me, because this is just before I knew that I had cancer. I was teaching a Sunday school class, and we were talking about Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and their faith. And he says, you know what? They told this tyrant, we know that our God can save us, but even if he doesn't, we're not going to bow to you. And that's how I lived, and that's how I wanted to live when I found out I had cancer. I says, I know my God can save me from this, but even if he doesn't, I'm not going to bow to this. Now, by no means was I illusioned to think that this couldn't kill me, because I didn't know how it was going to turn out. But my prayer was that God would heal me and that he would use me in a healthy, active way throughout my life. But if he didn't, if he decided not to heal me, that he would use me for the time that I had left. That wasn't an easy prayer, but that was my prayer. There was times that Lola and I would cried in each other's arms. There was times it was difficult. It seemed like every time I turned around, there was another trial. None of the procedures went normally. There were always hiccups. At one point, the chemo caused me to have a heart attack. I was life-flighted. I ended up on a feeding tube for 6 months and had to learn how to eat again. But the outpouring of love from this church was indescribable. I just can't tell you. It's just something you have to experience, I guess. But God brought me through it, and he saved my life again, and he's given me another life. And now today, you know, I'm looking for the next adventure. I am. I'm pushing myself harder than I have before as far as doing physical sports and activities. And I thank God every day that I'm able to do those things. You know, sometimes I'm excited about the things going on with the youth, and I'm excited about. I look forward to the next things that we're going to be doing. I know I don't have control, so I don't try too very hard. I try to do my best and be prepared and do what I'm supposed to do and what he's telling me to do. But I don't worry about it so much, because I know he's got it. It's his plan, and it's going to work out the way he wants it to. The only thing I just want to leave you with is, don't waste your dash. You live your life for Christ and live it to the full. Be adventurely expectant. That's it.
Thank you. Thanks to both Robert and Chelsea for sharing tonight. Over the past month, we've heard some pretty great stories, some pretty great testimonies. We've had 8 different people come up here. And I know over the past month, I've referenced all of their stories and conversations I've had with other people. And I'm sure over the next week, 2 weeks, month, year, whatever it might be, I'm going to reference Chelsea and Robert as well and things they mentioned. We have our stories to share. We don't go through these things to go through them alone. We don't go through these things so we can't share them. It's not things, we don't have these experiences in our lives to just bottle them up. We have these testimonies, we have these stories, we have these lives that God has given us to be shared with other people. And that leads to the challenge we have for this week is, are we doing that? Are we sharing these stories? And if we're called to share our stories, is it one of those, do we kind of shirk at the chance to do it? Or do we boldly step up, introduce ourselves, and say, this is what God has done in my life? See, to do that, we have to trust, A, what God has actually done in our lives. But B, that God's gone before us, and He softened the heart of those who are going to hear our story. To be bold for Christ, it requires us to trust Christ. One doesn't happen without the other. So I encourage you this week to be bold, to find somebody, to share your story with one person. Psalm 116. I love the Lord because He has heard my appeal for mercy. Because He has turned His ear to me, I will call out to Him as long as I live. The ropes of death were wrapped around me, and the torments of Sheol overcame me. I encountered trouble and sorrow. Then I called on the name of Yahweh. Yahweh, save me. The Lord is gracious and righteous. Our God is compassionate. The Lord guards the inexperienced. I was helpless, and He saved me. Return to your rest, my soul, for the Lord has been good to you. For you, Lord, rescued me from death, my eyes from tears, my feet from stumbling. If we've been saved, if we know Christ, we felt this. These words are real. We trust that these words are real, not because they're written in the Bible, but because we've lived them. This is my life in words. This is my death in words. My resurrection through Christ in words. And I'm not the only one who has that story. You heard 2 stories of that tonight with Robert and Chelsea. The life we knew, the life we thought we had, the life we thought that was so great and so wonderful. It's nothing but a sham. It's not real. It's not truth. It's a lie. Before Christ, it's all a lie. We're living for something that's not concrete. It's not real. It doesn't really exist, but in our head. We live for ideas and ideals that aren't real. But when we live for Christ, when we die to ourselves and live for Christ, it all comes into focus. And we can trust God to light our path. We can trust God to hold our hands. We can trust God to save us and deliver us because He said that He will. And He does every single time. The best time to trust Christ is yesterday. But the best time after that is right now. If you haven't placed your trust in Christ and the only thing that is real, I encourage you to do so. You don't have the control that you think you have. You're trusting in things that shift with the wind. There's one constant in life, and that's Jesus. And it's by his light we walk. By his plan we live. So the challenge this week is share your story with one person. Challenge part B, or 2. Live for Christ. If you've already turned your life over to Christ, but then taken it back, turn back to him. Because we do that. We say, Jesus, I'm yours. And then we turn back and say, no, I'm mine. Then we get into trouble and we say, Jesus, I'm yours. And we turn back and say, no, I'm mine. What does your life look like if you just say, Jesus, I'm yours? And you live your life continually walking towards him? That's a life that's bold. You need to trust Jesus, and you can live it out. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, God, it's by your blood that we are saved, and only by your blood that truly we live. God, I just pray for the hearts in this room, Lord, if they haven't turned to you, Lord, if they've been closed off to you, Lord, that they're open now to make a decision for you. And for those who've already made that decision, Lord, but have turned back to their own ways and grabbed hold of their life thinking they have control, Lord, I pray they can let go and truly let God. God, I pray for boldness on everybody in this room, Lord, that they trust you, that the words out of their mouth are yours, that the stories they tell, Lord, yes, about them, but God, you are the main character. And your love, your grace, your mercy, and your deliverance is known to all that we come in contact with. In Jesus' name, amen.